Hey guys, Grumpy here with a guide to getting started in colonization. So I do have two colony guides out right now at the time of recording this. One is a beginner's guide, but that starts after you have a couple planets already established. And then the other one is an advanced guide, which covers more the end game and maximizing your profits. This guide is going to cover right from the exploration stage going into building your first planet. So before you can even colonize, you need to do exploration. You need to find and scout a good planet. These are the rule of thumbs that I look for when I'm deciding what world to settle in, or what world to colonize. So first of all, the planet can't be by itself. I very rarely will settle a world that is just isolated by itself. The only way I'd settle it is if it's a minus 50 Terran world with +2 organics and +2 like farmland and +3 ore or whatever. Like it has to be the golden planet in order for me to settle it, and even then I still might not settle it, especially not as my first planet. So it can't be by itself. It has to be in a system. If we look at here, we have the Delta Brea star system. It needs other planets around it, right? So if you go to the intel screen, after you do your exploration, you're gonna have a lot of planets here, right? Things that you've scanned. It's gonna be very messy at first. In order to clean up this list and like make it actually useful, because it'll show you just every planet in the game, you need to go to planets and stations. Then you need to do fully surveyed, and then unclaimed. So you could do uninhabited, but what that's gonna do is it's gonna show you planets in the core worlds that don't have colonies on them. So it'll show you something like in Asconia. It'll include something like Kang or Salus here. And if you settle these worlds, you can. If you settle these worlds, Sindri is not gonna like it, and they're gonna tactically bombard your or saturation bombard your world. So don't do that. Right. So going back to the intel screen, planets, you want to set it for unclaimed. So this will show you all the planets that you surveyed and their breakdown of their, well, the planet name, the resources and affixes on that planet, the location of the planet, the distance it is from you, the class of the planet. You can ignore this, but generally the higher the class, so they go from 1 to 5. The higher the class, the better the planet is. In the game's eyes, I mean, the player, I evaluate planets differently than the game does, but that's just there. And then finally, you have the hazard rating, so it's going to be on a scale between 50 and 300. The lowest planet you can get is 50. That's very rare. You need a lot of affixes to come together for that to happen. And the highest is 300. Typically you'll see 275 at the max. 300 is also pretty rare. So after you sorted this and you're going through your list of planets, all the planets you've explored, you need to start evaluating systems. So here, right now we're in the Delta Brea system. Here we have 4 planets. These 4 planets are phenomenal, and I'm about to explain why. So here, starting off with the gas giant, you get diffuse volatiles. Volatiles are really good for fuel production. Also, volatiles are very profitable. Next up, on the water world, you have abundant organics. So you're gonna get mining. You're gonna get organics from mining. You also have a water cover surface, which if you read, you're like, well, this gives you farming, but if you read down at the bottom below the hazard rating, it says no bonuses or penalties to food production, in parentheses farming. So this isn't the same as farmland. With farmland, you actually build a farm. With a water cover surface, I believe you build hydroponics, but both produce food for your colony. Then you have this barren world. This barren world produces rare ore deposits as well as regular ore deposits. And then it has no atmosphere and extreme heat. I'll go into that in a little bit. But these are really good modifiers that you want to look for on your barren worlds. Then you have, again, this other barren world, same thing. Rare ore, rich, regular ore, and then no atmosphere and hot. So the reason this system is so good is because it hits every single base resource that the game requires in order to build industries, which we'll go into a little later. When choosing a world to settle on, right, it can't be alone, and then the next thing is the planets that are in that system have to be diverse. They have to be diverse enough to cover most, if not all, of the base resources in the game. If you don't if you don't find them in the same system, right, and you spread your colonies out over different star systems, what'll happen is as your colonies grow, they'll generate more threat, and it becomes harder and harder to defend them as they'll be spread out. With this system, all these planets being here, what'll happen is all the fleets will protect each other. All the planets will protect each other with their fleets, making things like inspections, pirate raids, pather attacks. It'll be harder and harder for those to be successful because you'll have so many fleets interwoven all over your system. Versus also trading between the colonies will be easier because it's very hard to intercept it if it's in the same system. So it'll be very easy for your planets to grow and thrive without too much interference. So that's why I look for multiple planets covering different resources within the same system. The next thing I look for when I'm deciding if a system is good or not, after I looked at the planets, after I looked at an individual planet, if I wanted to settle one, is looking at the stable locations. So stable locations are important. A system can have anywhere between 0 and 3. Ideally, you want 3. You won't always get 3. That's fine. But you want at least 1. You want at least 1 stable location. Now, stable locations, what they're good for are for makeshift relays. So if you look at Asconia, makeshift relays provide a global benefit to your colonies. So here we have a comm relay. It provides stability to your colonies. We have a sensor array which provides plus 400 sensor range to your fleets. And then we have a nav buoy which adds burn speed to your fleets. These, just very quickly, this isn't related to colonization, but very quickly, domain artifact relays that you find will be whole. Relays that are built will have slashes going through them. So sometimes you'll stumble upon a world or stumble upon a star system and it'll have domain relays inside of them. Just go ahead and activate them. They're going to provide a bigger benefit to you. The normal comm relay provides +1 stability. The domain version provides +2. So that's the only difference in the UI. The domain version of the sensor array provides +700 sensor range. The makeshift provides 400. So that's the only difference there. So if you don't have stable locations, don't worry. It is still possible to create one, but what it requires is at least one. It requires an AI core, and you have to fly into the sun. Now, it isn't going to consume the alpha AI core, but you need one at least in order to do the process. So not everyone's going to have an alpha AI core before they go to colonize. But if you do happen to have one and you find a good system that doesn't have any stable locations, you can fly into the sun with your alpha AI core and build a stable location. To build a stable location, you need 100 metal and 10 transphotonics per stable location. So make sure you bring that with you before you fly into the sun. If you have trouble getting to the sun, what you can do is you can activate emergency burn, and then that'll stop the coronal winds from pushing you away. Okay, so after it has stable locations, then the next thing I evaluate is, does it have a gate nearby? And this is a little spoilery, but towards the end game, you can use these gates to travel. You can travel around between the gates. So here we have the Corvus Gate. It's in the core worlds. So what that means is if I fly from Delta Brea to MAM and I use this gate here, I can jump from MAM and teleport all the way to Corvus. And there are two benefits with that. One, you save all the fuel that you would burn normally to travel. It still costs you fuel, but it's only a fraction of what it would actually cost. So you can bring your fleet from the outer worlds, right? So if you find gates out here, you can bring them from the outer worlds all the way back to the core worlds. You can buy, refit, refuel, things like that. And then two, using the gates, you can establish a world in a system with a gate. It's like, ma'am, you could establish a world here, and then when you use your gates, right, like say you're exploring out here, you get into a really bad battle, but you know there's a gate, let's say in like Calico. You could jump into Calico, take the gate, jump back to ma'am, and then say that this was your colony. You can go ahead and refit here. You don't have to worry about surviving hyperspace, dodging storms, any of that. You can just fly from the gate to your planet, repair, and then fly back out to Calico and continue exploring. So it's really good having a gate nearby your core worlds. It isn't necessary by your colonies. It isn't necessary, but it is just a nice quality of life. If you can find a gate nearby, then that's fantastic. If you can find a gate in the system that you're colonizing, then that's even better. But it isn't a priority. So those are the three things that I look for. Good planets in a group. Does the system have stable locations? And then is there a gate nearby? Okay. So after you find a group of planets that satisfies all three of those or most of those, you need to go ahead and colonize it. So I don't have enough to do that on me, but in order to establish a colony, you need 1,000 crew. It is consumed. It says here it is consumed. You need heavy machinery, and then you also need supplies. These costs are going to be set by the hazard rating of the planet. So some things to consider there when you go to colonize. You don't always have to, but you can check the consider other factors tab, and it'll tell you like, hey, you're too close to another faction. There's a cryo sleeper nearby, a hypershun, things that will affect your colony either positively or negatively. It'll be in this tab. I rarely check it though, because usually it's blank anyway. But then you would hit the establish colony button and it'll bring you to the next screen, which if I go ahead and switch over, you'll be able to see on my main campaign. Alright, so here we have Spirit. It's a planet that I colonized recently. It'll bring you to a screen that looks very similar to this. We'll go ahead and do that. And it'll bring you to a screen kind of similar to this. This is your colony management screen. So this is how you're going to upgrade your colony, build buildings, add resources, things like that. When you establish a colony, I recommend you do a few things. So first of all, turn on hazard pay. That's going to increase your growth rate. Next, I recommend that you use click this button that says use stockpiles during shortages. That's turned off by default. I don't know why. It should be enabled by default, but that's okay. Then you're going to want to activate free port status. Now, this is not going to be available. It'll say cannot activate until your spaceport is built. Your spaceport takes 15 days to build. But that's not true. All you have to do is wait 1 day, one in-game day. Go to the command screen, find the planet that you're on, so I'm on Spirit, and then you can enable it through the command screen. So why would you enable Freeport? What does it matter? What's up going with this growth rate? Let's explain a few things. Your growth rate is how fast your planet is going to grow from colony size 3 to 4, 4 to 5, and then 5 to 6. 6 is the maximum size that a planet can grow in vanilla Starsector. So you want a high growth rate because your planet is not going to be profitable until you're probably size 5, and then definitely it should be profitable by size 6. But between sizes 3 and 4 and 4 and 5 is when you're going to spend the most money. 4 and 5 in particular, because your growth rate slows down dramatically. Alright. Ways you can get your growth rate up is if you hover over it, you see things like here, accessibility. So for every 10 points of accessibility, you're going to get a point in growth. Then Your hazard rating is gonna subtract from your growth rate, obviously, because it's dangerous to live there. Not everyone's gonna make it. Then you have hazard pay. Hazard pay, what it does is it outstrips your hazard rating, and it costs based on what your hazard rating is. So if I turn on hazard pay, it's gonna cost me 20k a month in order to sustain it. Then, is your planet habitable or not? You get 2 points for that. Is it Freeport status? So that's going to increase the growth rate. And then you'll start off with a spaceport, but if you upgrade it to a megaport, then you'll get the megaport bonus, which will also increase your growth rate. So when you first establish your planet, after the first 15 days, I recommend upgrading the spaceport to a megaport. That's going to increase your accessibility as well as increase your population growth. Accessibility is very crucial for your first world. That's why you want to settle your planets near the core worlds so that you can have pretty high accessibility. Later on in the game, it doesn't matter so much because your colonies will feed each other. But in the early game, you kind of want to settle nearest the core worlds. So after you upgrade after your spaceport is built, you'll have a couple options of different buildings you can build. This is what I recommend. Build things like the battle station and ground defenses because they can be upgraded. So you can only build one building at a time, but you can upgrade as many buildings as you want simultaneously. So you can upgrade the megaport, the battle station, and ground defenses while you're still building things like the way station. So I recommend battle station, ground defenses, things that can be upgraded first. Then the way station. The way station is going to add more accessibility to your worlds. So it's really good. And then build your industry. So every planet is limited on what industry it can produce, or how many industries it can build. And here, if you hover over the industry UI, I guess, it'll tell you. So for a colony size 3 worlds, we get 1 industry. That checks out, 3 and 1. Once we grow in size, we'll be able to build 2 industries, then 3, and then 4. So the way I decide what industries to build on a world is very straightforward in the early game. As we progress, though, you can build industries however you want. It doesn't really matter once you hit a certain critical threshold of colonies, because all your colonies will feed each other. But what I like to build typically is, if we go to a better example, like Shade, is I build the industries that the planet provides, like as far as like raw resources. So for example, one of the first things I built on this planet was farming, because it has rich farmland, right? So it has +1 to farming. So I was able to quickly feed not only this colony but all the rest of my colonies, because I had the +1. I had the domain artifact, which soil nanites provides +2 to farming. So this became a very profitable industry very quickly. Then from there, I built mining. Again, this planet provides ore and it also provides organics. So we get ore and organics from mining, which is really good. And then after that, I just built on the process, right? So since we're producing ore and organics, I built light industry. So light industry is your first like money making industry. It produces, if you look down at production, it produces domestic goods, luxury goods, and then recreational drugs. That's because I have Freeport status on. If I turn off Freeport status, it doesn't produce nearly as many recreational drugs. So I have it on. That's why I'm getting so many. This is really good. The reason why I built it on this planet and not, like, say, another planet when I first started was because the goods, if you look down below that, the demands and effects, it requires 6 organics to operate, and the mining here produces 7. So you can also see that up here, it produces 7. So what that means is my upkeep cost is barely anything. Right, if this were like heavy industry or refining, some other industry that this planet doesn't support, I would have to pay to import the raw resources in order to produce them into these goods. which is going to cut into my profits. It's not going to be as profitable. So that's what I definitely recommend when you build your industries. And then finally, for my last industry, I built commerce. Again, just making light industry more profitable by building commerce. Right, it all feeds into each other. So farming feeds the planet literally, then mining feeds industry, industry feeds commerce, and commerce increases the amount of credits per month that I generate. So that covers basically the all the basics of finding a planet, establishing it, and then the industries that you need for the planet. I hope that was helpful. Oh, one thing before I end the guide is stability. Stability is critically important to your colony's success. Stability controls so many different features, like your growth rate. It determines how profitable your colony is going to be. So, at every opportunity you should look to see how you can increase your stability. Right now, I have commerce built and I have Freeport status, so it's really hard to stay above 6. But if I took some efforts, concerted efforts, I could probably bring this up to 8. And then with great great investment, I could probably bring it all the way back up to 10. So right now that's eating into our credits per month. But definitely you want to prioritize stability, and ways you get stability is if you hover over a building like the Star Fortress here, it'll tell you provides stability bonus of +3. I believe the Patrol HQ also provides a +1 bonus, and the Heavy Battery also provides +1. And then, yeah, Population and Infrastructure also provides +2. But that's dependent on your the goods required being met. But that's the guide. That's everything I wanted to cover. Hope that helps you guys pick your first planets. It can be intimidating figuring out, where to colonize or how to colonize. But just look for a good group of planets. Again, using the planet tier list. Going with planets and stations, and then unclaimed. Just find a system that has a lot of worlds in it. They don't have to be spectacular. They don't have to be the best worlds, but you want to cover a diverse group of goods. You want to make sure that's stable locations, and then when you go to build your planet, you want to prioritize buildings that you can upgrade first, and buildings that provide stability. Then build your industries. Other than that, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And Grumpy out.